empowering you through the voice of truth with your host, Dr. Joel Hunter.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Joel Hunter, host of Power Talks, empowering you through the voice of truth. On today's program, we have Maria Shorkey, who is the Associate Executive Director of Covenant House of Florida, Dr. Leonard C. Bass, who is the Campus Dean for Learning Support at Valencia College East Campus, and Libby Nieves, I hope I didn't ruin that too bad, the Director of Program Services at Covenant House of Florida. And I'm looking forward to learning from these experts on how we can better help young people who are in crisis or at risk. I'm a huge fan of Covenant House. I want to know a little bit, I want to help our audience know a little bit about the history of Covenant House. And you were telling me, Maria, that it was, the actual organization was founded in New York in what year?
In the late 60s.
Okay.
By a Catholic priest that was challenged by his college students to do something about the problems ailing society more than just standing in the classroom and talking about
Okay,
them.
and what was his original purpose? What was he going for?
Well, he came across young people that seemed to be on the street with no place to go. They were too old to be in the foster care system in some instances, kids that may have been not able to sustain on their own, and he started asking around the community, like, have you noticed these kids? Do you know where they're going to? Do you know who their parents are? And what he learned was that there weren't a lot of programs out there serving young people without a place to call home.
And how many states are you in there right now?
We are spread out through all of North and Central America.
Okay. And Libby, you were at the beginning of the Covenant House when Covenant House came to Orlando. Tell us about that.
Sure, that's right, I was. When Covenant House first came to Orlando, we had a drop-in center in downtown Orlando where we provided day services, food, shower, clothing, basic services, but every night at 5 or 6, we would close the doors and the youth would go back out onto the street. So we knew in Central Florida we needed to do more. So I wasn't part of all of the planning, but a group came together, they fundraised, they found a great property, renovated that to become a shelter. And so as an entry-level staff, I was right there watching. The night the shelter was able to be open, we didn't know what we were doing, but we knew we did not want to turn this group of youth back out onto the streets. It was getting cold outside for Florida standards. Yeah. And we said, let's open the shelter tonight. Let's get some staff together. Let's go. We have our license. Let's go ahead and open. So we grabbed the van, we invited any youth who wanted to come stay in the shelter to come, and we loaded up the van and we drove to our shelter, and we've never looked back. We've been open every day since, providing services to homeless youth in Central Florida.
Well, and we want to know what those services are just as we move along here, but let me ask you, Leonard, you're a member of the board, is that right?
That's right.
How did that happen? How did you get interested in this field?
Sure. About 6 years ago, we hired a new campus president at our East Campus, and she really encouraged her cabinet to kind of make sure that we were focusing on the needs of the community. And so she asked us to consider organizations within our community that aligned with our passion and our sense of purpose. And so I shared with her that I was interested in serving at-risk youth.
Now, why is that?
I grew up in a kind of a rough urban environment, and there were a lot of people that invested in me, mentored me, kind of came alongside me at times when I really needed them. And I know that it was because of these people who invested in me that I was able to get through college. And so I just want to kind of return that sense of commitment and that investment that people have made in me to other youth that might need that kind of support.
That's fantastic. I love personal stories that I got to give this back. You know, I got to give this back. Maria, you started out in the business world, right? That's your education.
Yes.
So how did you? You know, this is Covenant House is a nonprofit. Is that right? And I want to know two things. First of all, how you got interested in this field, and then secondly, just from your operational perspective, what are the different programs you have?
Okay, well, Many years ago, when I finished college, I decided to do a year of ministry, and I was signed up to work in an agency that served children that had been abused and neglected in Massachusetts, and they had been removed from their parents' care. I just love working with that population, and when I went back home at the end of my year of service, I read a book about Covenant House, Florida. Fell in love with Covenant House as a ministry, and I thought if I ever lived in a state that has a Covenant House, I want to be involved. And one day I moved to Orlando and drove by our original crisis center in Orange Avenue and started volunteering with the agency. I think that in the years that I've been there, I met the most resilient kids you could ever imagine that won't allow any hardship to really keep them down, that continue to push forward. And I just love working in an organization that its focus is to come up with services and programs that would help those kids be able to become successful in life. We know that 70% of our kids have not obtained a high school diploma, so we have a great education program at Covenant House.
Okay, let me stop you right there because people are going to go, let's do the segue right now. Then we're going to come back, and then we're going to come back. But tell us about, you know, a lot of these kids really have had significant barriers in their lives and vulnerable and had not had the opportunity other kids have had. How do they come into an educational path that will really fit their gifts and their talents and what they want to do in life?
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, so about 4 years ago, Valencia embarked on this journey to kind of think about curriculum that would help students answer 4 existential questions that we think are really key to them understanding kind of why they're in college and how they can leverage their education to become who they were created to be. And so these 4 questions are kind of who am I? So they do a lot of assessments, self-assessments to understand their strengths. And weaknesses, kind of academic weaknesses. The second question is, why am I here? So we spend a lot of time helping students understand and find their sense of purpose. The third question is, where am I going? So we help students with academic planning. We try to ensure that they're making the right academic decisions in terms of programs of study, transfer pathways to other educational institutions locally, and how will I get there? And so we ask students to identify mentors, professional and personal, to help to create a sense of support, a support system for themselves. And so this is these 4 questions are questions that they answer in their new student experience course.
That is so. You know, I can just see everybody watching right now. I'm going to apply to a Valencia because I need to answer those questions for my life. But that's so great. And so you take people right where they are,
That's right.
and you design a pathway for them to that fits their wiring and their goals in life and so on and so forth. That's fantastic. Let me come back to you because before we go back to Maria to tell us about the larger organization, tell us about the different programs that Covenant House has, and basically what's the population of Covenant House?
Well, we have a lot of different programs because one-size-fit-all approach does not work with homeless youth because homeless youth are coming from many different backgrounds and many different situations. I mean, we know they have certain things in common. Most homeless youth have experienced some sort of trauma. About 34% have aged out of foster care, been at foster care at some point. We know that there's a significant amount of mental illness, substance abuse, just all types of barriers and obstacles and experiences that the youth have been through. And we know that there's some youth who are new to experiencing homelessness. We call those youth first on the street. This is a new experience for them. Something happened and they find themselves in this situation. And we know we work with other youth who've been on the street for quite some time. They've been, on the street surviving and doing whatever they can to get by. So they're in a different part of their life. So for that reason, Covenant House has lots of different services to meet the very needs of the homeless youth.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So it starts with street outreach team. We have a team of 2 staff that go out literally on the street. So that means the woods, the malls.
How do you know where to go?
We call them youth hotspots. So we try to gather information from other homeless adults in the community, from guidance counselors at schools. I mean, really just like detective work.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
So any place that youth might be hanging out is also going to be a spot where you're going to find homeless youth, because youth want to blend in. They're not going to be typically the stereotypical type of a homeless person that you see on the side of the road. They're going to be blending in.
Yeah.
So you have to blend in with other youth. College campuses, the mall food court, different areas where youth hang out are going to be places that our street outreach team is going to they're going to frequent.
Yeah, wow. Maria, let me come back to you because let's zoom back out to the big picture. I do want to come back and,
Sure.
and ask a couple of questions about maybe a person who's gone through the system and you've watched them develop and so on and so forth. But overall, how is organizationally, how is the organization designed to help a person transition from homeless, you know, really in crisis, to someone who has a plan, they're equipped, and they're ready to take their place in society? What's the kind of the pathway?
Well, our mission is to provide unconditional love and absolute respect to all the suffering youth, and we have several principles, and one of them is choice. And by that principle, we meet the youth where they're at. We provide them that variety of programs that Ms. Nieves was describing, so that they can make themselves the choices to improve their own situation. For kids that are on the street, that may be some safety planning so that they are in a more safe environment. For kids that are first on the street, it may be opening a bed immediately to have that youth be in a safe spot as opposed to trying to survive on the street, so that they're not mentored to the street.
While you're saying that, you open a bed. Tell us about your residential capabilities right now. What do you have?
We have a 24-bed shelter and a transitional housing program that has capacity for up to 38.
Okay, all right.
Yes, and unfortunately that means there's a long waiting list.
I was going to ask
every
if you're
year.
at capacity. Yeah.
Yes, our program last year had about 660 youth on our waiting list throughout the year.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. That just hurts my heart. So when they come into the shelter, what programs do they get involved with? I mean, what do you do?
We have educational programs that include general equivalency diploma classes, employability skills classes. We also have a lot of mom and babies that come to our program. So we have a child development program that also includes parenting education and family seminars. We have case managers to help the youth work with their own plan so that they can find their path to self-sufficiency. And then we do a transitional housing program that is sort of an aftercare opportunity for the young people that graduate our shelter or that graduate some other program in the community to move into their own apartment.
How long is somebody like in the emergency shelter, and then how long could they be in the transitional care program? And
they can be in the transitional housing program for up to 2 years,
Okay.
but the path varies depending on the youth needs.
Yeah.
If we have a young mother with 3 children that shows to our door, it probably is going to take her a lot longer to be able to find a place where she's stable and safe than it would be for a young person that is single and has a high school diploma already and is looking to go to college.
Yeah.
So we tailor the programs to the specific needs of the kids. The average length of stay is about 40 days in our crisis shelter, but that average is not realistic because it means that some kids stay with us for a couple of days and some kids stay with us for a few months.
Okay, but when they go someplace, do they have someplace to go? I mean, is that do you release them? I mean, they're free to go. I'm sure they're of age, but do you release them to someplace?
It depends. Because it is a choice-based program,
I got you.
at some point in time, our kids may decide that the structure in the shelter is something that they're not ready for.
I got you.
And they may decide to leave on their
Okay.
own accord and not necessarily have a stable place to go.
Okay.
The majority of the kids that go through the program are able to exit to the program to some stable housing.
Okay.
We do have an issue with affordable housing in our community.
Tell me about it.
So some of our kids become homeless even after they've been able to stabilize because they can't afford current
Yeah.
housing options in our community.
That's a whole nother program.
Yes.
But Leonard, tell me some of the educational paths that these young people take in order to go to the next step in their life.
Sure. So one of the things that has always amazed me since I started this work with Covenant House is the goals that these youth have. Right. I mean, the streets hasn't beaten their dreams out of them, and they are still interested in pursuing degrees from accounting to biology to psychology, mechanical engineering. When we have an opportunity, once a year, we do a sleep out. So friends and the board members sleep outside to try to raise money for the youth at Covenant House. But what's most...
Wait a minute. They're going to go, what? How would they raise money sleeping out, and where are they? You know, so describe that event for me.
Sure. So typically the week of Thanksgiving, at the shelter, we hold an executive sleep out. And so board members, friends of Covenant House, work months in advance to try to raise funds. So all the people who don't like me pay to see me sleep outside.
Do you get so much per hour?
But no, seriously, I'm just amazed in terms of my community at Valencia at the number of faculty and staff and administration that are concerned about this issue and who kind of commit funding and support to see that we, as friends of Valencia, really understand this issue. And so many have partnered with me during the sleep out to kind of spend a night outside to understand what our students go through, right? Who are homeless or who are living at Covenant House and trying to kind of complete their education. And you know, for the student who has a strong support network at home, it's hard. For a student who's on the streets, who's trying to survive, meet their basic needs, it's extremely difficult. And you don't understand that until you're out there laying under the stars or being rained on or fighting bugs so or you know, just not being able to get a good night's rest and then having to go and study. And so it's impacted me in profound ways.
Good for you.
And so the students do try to blend in at Valencia. And so we make it our kind of focus to help our faculty, those that are going to be working with these students, to understand what it means to the students who are coming to Valencia to have someone at that institution who truly cares. And so we're working to create a culture of care at Valencia in a very intentional way.
That's so key, and I hear this again and again and again, that the chief or the prerequisite for working with marginalized communities is empathy. You have to know what they're going through.
Absolutely.
Let me. I'm going to throw you a curveball here.
Okay.
Okay. You ready? Okay. Can you call to mind any personal stories of people that have gone through Covenant House where you go, man, I'm glad we were there for them, you know? And I'm sure there are hundreds, and it's tough just to pick out one or two, but just tell us a story. People love stories.
And there are hundreds. I mean, there's so many that are near and dear to my heart, and it just is such a privilege to be part of their journey. And sometimes you're planting seeds and you don't get to see what happens, and you just pray and hope for the best. But there are times when you definitely see from the beginning of the journey to the end, and that's such a opportunity and a blessing to be able to witness that. Working at Covenant House many years now, I do recall one young lady that is near and dear to my heart, that she came to our shelter. She was on the streets in Central Florida for a few nights, was scared, wasn't able to go back to her family for reasons that she didn't share right away, and it just, family wasn't an option and wasn't a support, and so she found herself alone on the streets in Central Florida. And she came to our crisis shelter, and one thing about our crisis shelter, We do have a waiting list, but we are open 24/7. That means if a youth comes to our door at 3 o'clock in the morning, we're there, and they do not have to sleep on the street. And so such was the case with this young lady. She came, and we immediately brought her in. If we don't have a bed available, sometimes we'll make space, if you will. And we brought her in, and she was so focused and so determined. I mean, you see youth that struggle and have to come to the shelter multiple times before they really make that choice to turn their lives in a positive direction. Not this young lady. From the moment she got there, she was not only working on her goals, but she was shining a bright light to others. She got to transition from the shelter to one of our apartments, where she lived for the full 2 years of the program, saving money and things like that. She saved a lot of money. I remember that. She worked multiple jobs, went to school. At the end of her time in the program, she was able to get married and buy a car, and she keeps in touch, and she's involved in missions, which is just amazing. She's gone on multiple mission trips and is involved in her church and has just blossomed into such a wonderful young lady that we feel privileged that we got to be part of her journey. But I do wonder, if we weren't there for her to be able to immediately bring her in, what would her story would have looked like? What would she have done to survive on the street? Who would have been there to, unfortunately, take advantage of her in her desperate situation? And so to see that story from beginning to end is just such a privilege.
That's such a great story. I love that. Maria, you have oversight of a significant staff. How many do you have on staff?
We have about 30 staff full-time, and we have some part-time staff as well.
Okay, that's terrific. And then volunteers, do you oversee volunteers?
Oh, we do have a volunteer coordinator, but we work hands-on with volunteers, so we have lots of ways to get involved.
Okay.
If
Great. Well, we want to hear those.
If I can pitch something.
Come on. That's why you're here. We want our community to be involved.
I mean, it really takes more than the staff. It takes the community to support the youth. And even if we could do it by ourselves, we don't want to do it by ourselves. We want the youth to know that there are people in the community that are there to mentor them and are praying for them and are there to support them. And so there's lots of different ways, but if I, definitely highlight what Leonard talked about with the executive sleep out. If you're willing to sleep on the street one night, that's a great way to get involved. But I'll tell you, we have a lot of teenagers that we serve every day, and we serve 120 meals a day. That's a lot of food.
Wow.
Besides the youth in our shelter, we serve meals to youth that are dropping in for services that maybe are on the street or in difficult situations. So that's breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 120 meals. Man. So if anyone in the community would like to sponsor a pizza night or a home-cooked meal for dinner or lunch, we would love it. We get to see church groups, businesses, individuals get to come and serve the meal or just drop the meal off, whatever they feel passionate about.
Fantastic.
A young lady actually paid for a pizza night recently in honor of her mom's birthday. Oh, that's what her mom wanted.
Isn't that great?
So she got to feed a whole bunch of youth living at the shelter pizza for her birthday.
Wow,
that's one way. I'm just talking about feeding teenagers.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, so if they go to the website, which will be on your screen, then they'll be able to
connect with us directly.
Yeah, exactly. That's fantastic. By the way, the executive sleep out. I'm so fascinated with this.
It's amazing.
Can any executive sleep out, or is it just people connected directly with Covenant House, or does everybody gather? What is the deal?
You can come join us.
I'm not sure I was asking that. I'll send my people.
Yeah, send it to you.
No, that sounds fascinating to me.
Last year we had about 75 sleepers.
Oh, okay.
We gather at the Orlando City Soccer Stadium.
Okay.
The Orlando City Soccer team
is
supporting the event. We raise over $170,000
really?
in one night.
I may do that. I may do that.
So it is a.
Now that I know it's in the stadium, you're not going to get drugged off by an alligator or something.
No, and it's a very nice area. It's beautiful there, but you still have only a cardboard box and a sleeping bag to spend the night. Yeah. But we do a panel of experts. We have youth that share their journey, and we talk a little bit about our programs and the services that we offer in the community. So it's a great opportunity for people to
And
learn.
that'd be on the website as well. Type in sleep out on the. Okay. All right. Very good. We only got a couple of minutes left, and so let me return to you, Maria. How can people in the community pray for you, assist what you're doing in their daily lives, kind of thing? How can they be involved?
Well, if people can contribute financially, that's something that if they would like to give money to Covenant House so that we can continue to serve our kids in the community. We certainly take prayers to give strength to our staff, to guidance for our kids. And I want to encourage people to get involved in our events or to get involved also in volunteering at the agency, showing homeless youth that the community is behind them as well.
Any general hints if somebody knows somebody in their life that's a kid in crisis? Any principles on, one principle on like how to work with them or how to address them or be with them in their crisis?
I think the most important thing is to encourage them to call an organization such as Covenant House.
Okay.
And we have our information online.
Good.
Encourage kids to look for directions before they decide to leave their home
Good.
in haste.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, we're out of time. I hate this. I want to talk some more. But I want to thank you and Libby and Leonard and Maria. Thank you. You guys are heroes in the community. You really are. And we appreciate what you're doing so much for a population that we all value. And so thank you for this kind of specialty service. And remember that as you join us, these discussions are just discussions among us, but we don't want them to stay here. We'd love to see you continue the discussions at home and go one step further. Get involved. Because when power talks, you're empowered through the voice of truth. See you next time.
You just watched Power Talks, a Good Life 45 original production that makes you part of our Hope Team here on Good Life 45, where hope happens.